So far we know two kinds of triads in the key of C. We have a C major triad and a C minor triad. There are four basic chord qualities for triads, so let's learn the other two. Play a C minor chord, 1 flat 3 5, C E flat G, and now take the fifth degree and flat it. Flat the fifth, meaning move the fifth, which is G, down a half step to G flat. Now you have C, E flat, G flat, 1 flat 3 flat 5, and that's called a diminished triad, or C diminished. It's diminished because you're shrinking the triad, right? The notes are getting closer together because you're flatting the fifth. So C to G is a larger interval than C to G flat, so it's diminished. So let's go through the inversions for C diminished. We have root position. Now E flat, G flat, C is all the way up here. That's first inversion. And then G flat, C, E flat up here. That's second inversion. Now let's learn one more triad. Go back to C major and sharp the fifth. So C, E, G, 1 3 5. Now sharp the fifth, or meaning move it up a half step. So we have 1 3 sharp 5, or C, E, G sharp. And that's called an augmented triad, or C augmented. It's augmented because, of course, you're expanding the interval, or augmenting one of the notes, the fifth degree. It's a regular C major triad with a sharp fifth. And here are the three inversions. So we have root position, C augmented. Now first inversion, E, G sharp, C. And then second inversion, G sharp, C, E. Now let's go through those four chord qualities that we know just in root position. So we have C major, C minor, C diminished, and C augmented. First go back to C major, then sharp the fifth. So again, major, minor, diminished, and augmented. In the last lesson we learned perfect fourth interval and perfect fifth. You also, of course, know major third, minor third, major second, and minor second. So if this is a diminished chord, C, E flat, G flat, and I call this note G flat, what do you think, as opposed to F sharp, right? What do you think this interval would be called? C to G flat. Well, it's called a diminished fifth because C to G is a perfect fifth, and when I move G down to G flat, I'm diminishing the interval by a half step, so it's called a diminished fifth. It's still a fifth. This interval is a fifth because C and G are 5 notes apart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and G flat is just a variation of G. C to G natural, is called perfect because of its consonants. It's perfect in contradistinction to a diminished fifth. C to F, as we know, is a perfect fourth. Now remember, to diminish is to shrink the interval, and to augment is to expand the interval. So if I call this note, instead of G flat, if I call it F sharp, what would this interval now be called? C to F sharp. Well, C to F is a perfect fourth, so C to F sharp is an augmented fourth. So if you're calling this note F sharp, this interval is an augmented fourth, and if you call it G flat, it's a diminished fifth. But of course, it's the same pitches. And a perfect fourth interval is also very consonant. So again, it's called perfect in contradistinction to an augmented fourth. There's another name that we call this interval, and it can be used regardless of how you spell this note, either F sharp or G flat. So if we count up from C, C to D is a whole step, D to E is a second whole step, and E to F sharp is a third whole step. We see that these notes are 3 whole steps apart. So we call this interval a tritone. Tri meaning 3 and tone meaning pitch or sound. So that's a tritone. It's a tritone, an augmented fourth, and a diminished fifth. For now we can just use tritone. So a tritone is dissonant. So dissonant, in fact, that in the Middle Ages it was actually banned, and it was called the devil's interval, or the devil in music, that interval. Maybe that's why I like it so much. And it's very hard to sing a tritone out of context. Try that, you'll see it's really hard. But if you start from a note right below or above it, like a perfect fifth, C, G, then it's easy. C, G flat. Or if you start from a perfect fourth, C, F sharp, then it's easier. So keep practicing all your other intervals, but now add the tritone. And like I just said, start with either a perfect fourth, and then sing the tritone. Or start with a perfect fifth, and then move down and sing the tritone. And play through the 4 chord qualities you now know, starting on C, so just root position. So C major, C minor, C diminished, and then go back to C major, and that will help you get to C augmented, so just by raising the fifth. So C augmented. Once you've practiced these for a while in root position, try going through the inversions again for each one. So C major, C minor, C diminished, and C augmented. You'll eventually begin to recognize the shapes of these chords for each inversion, and it'll get easier to construct them. Just go slowly, go step by step for each chord, and you should be good. Alright, see you in the next lesson.